So the whole system is being revamped. This will come into application in June next year. And we at the agency, we are preparing for this. We are supporting member states, the Commission. We're changing all our work that we've done for the last 14 years. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here, inviting me to this distinguished meeting. I had about 26 years of experience in this field now, and what we can see today is that migration, which is a powerful force, is now also powerful enough to change governments, and it's happening all the time. However, remember, I am a civil servant and I'm representing an asylum agency, so we are not dealing in the overall migration question, but I will touch upon it anyways. But let me start with just saying a few words on what this agency does. So we're supporting the member states of the EU. We are having technical and operational support. We build container camps and we send case officers when a system is overwhelmed. We have training for case officers so that they can have a common understanding of the legal system, the international and the European system. And we provide knowledge. You need to know a lot about different countries in this field. You need to know what's going on in Afghanistan or in South Sudan and all over the world to be able to determine these cases. And we work a bit in partnership with third countries as well. But maybe I should say something about asylum, because everybody's talking about asylum, and it leads me to think that people know what asylum is. I think very few knows what it is, because we who are working with these cases, we're always criticized. There's a 4-year-old girl, she's sick, she's cute, and we throw her out. There's a terrorist here, and we let him stay. And people get confused by this. They say, surely this must be a mistake. You mean the girl can stay and the terrorist must go home, right? No. It's the opposite. And then people don't understand it anymore. Everybody should have a mandatory course in asylum for at least 5 years. I'm talking global population now. Maybe it's too big of a proposal. But to explain what asylum is, you probably need 400, you write a book on 400 pages, which I did, incidentally. But if you do the very short version, imagine this. You're walking down the riverbank. Maybe you're walking your dog, something. Suddenly you see someone who's drowning in the river. If you throw in a lifesaver to that person, that is the equivalent of aid. If you take off your jacket and you jump in, you swim, and you bring that person back, that's the equivalent of resettlement or quota refugees. If you stand and look, and then the person managed to crawl up on your side of the river, that is asylum. Asylum means you cannot push him back into the river. But it gets more complicated, because if it turns out that this person, when he comes up he's a professional swimmer. He's Johnny Weissmuller or someone. I always try to see who chuckles on that, because then you know you're old if you remember Johnny Weissmuller. No, if he is he was not in danger, then you may push him back again. That is called return. And to make it even more difficult, it could also be that this person who's drowning is actually drowning, comes up, you cannot push him in the deep end of the river. But over there's a bit of a shallow, there's not so much, it's okay, it's not so deep. You can push him in there, and that's called internal flight alternative. This is short what asylum is. And I hope UNHCR is not in the room, because I think there will be quarrel with the short version. What we have been doing forever is tackling maybe an eternal problem in a temporary way. So if you look at it, if you want to look at it extensively, migration has always been around. Always. Man has always migrated for different reasons. Could be forced, could maybe famine or something, or you're curious, or you think it's better on the other side. You know, that we're talking about tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands probably. Yet, we still, when something happens, we tackle it very temporarily. And for as long as I've been working in this, because it goes up and down. More people coming, fewer people are coming, and then we attack that wave in a temporary way. And this is perhaps this will not go away. This will be going on. What's happened is that back in the day, you couldn't move around the earth. Today you can. And that could happen very quickly, that a lot of people come at once. And I think it's deeply human to be afraid when there's big change. And when there's a lot of people coming from another country, a lot of people, they get scared. For us, in the civil service, I heard the distinguished speakers here, who has a bit of a broader viewpoint than me. But for us, it is to try to manage and maintain fair and proportionate systems. It's a very small task. I can't stand here and say this is how we should change the world. This is what we're tasked with. This is what we have to work with. And we're doing that. And let me give a couple of examples here that I think everybody remembers. So in 2015, the migration crisis. I mean, most people see it as a limited. There was the crisis of 15 because it has a name, but it had been going on since 2011 in that version. It was quite a slow development, and I'm talking specifically about Syria. It took years, and then there was a crescendo. And then all systems failed in Europe. Do we have any Greek colleagues with us? No? Then I'm free to talk. No, we supported Greece, of course, because that was the epicenter. But remember that in that year, Greece only had 13,000 asylum seekers, and Germany had 1.2 million. You won't find that in the statistics because they couldn't process all of them, so it was divided on 2 years, but they actually came in 15. The country where I come from, Sweden, had 162,000. So at that time, there was a push north. So a lot of people, they were on their way north. They all passed through Greece, obviously. And this was supposed to be regulated by the Dublin regulation. So the first country you come to, if you continue to another country, you have to go back to the first one. And the North was quite annoyed with this, but you're letting everybody through. Everybody's going through, and to come to us. Imagine if all systems would have worked, they were overwhelmed, so they couldn't work. But if they worked, then everybody should go back to Greece. And then we would have 1 million in Greece instead. Either way, that doesn't work so well. And that was... and the crisis management was basically getting accommodation. That was the thing. Fast forward to after the brutal invasion of 22, and we had very fast 4 million Ukrainians coming to the Union. Then there was a different response. First of all, this was neighbor, border to EU. They also were visa-free. You could not stop them from coming into EU, like everybody else. unless you would revoke the visa. But that would be kind of harsh for a neighbor. So people were coming, and there was hundreds of thousands the first days. Then the response from the EU was quite different, and the Temporary Protection Directive came into force. And all the differences that we saw from 2015 were gone. Convergence is something we strive for. Can't have 80% refugee status for Afghanis in one country and 20 in another. But we do have that. But in the Ukrainian conflict, everybody had 100% because it was automatic. That also made people go where not depending on how likely it was that you would get a permit. They went where they had friends or opportunity, which made a completely different picture. Sweden, who had been one of the leading destination countries in 2015, was totally rejected by the Ukrainians. There were like 50,000 coming first year, 20 went somewhere else. We ended up with 30,000. And countries that didn't even notice 2015, like Portugal and other countries, they had a lot of Ukrainians. Now, this is probably not a solution. Again, I'm not a politician, because this was based on 100% that everybody got asylum or protection. And it was necessary because 4 million people, the asylum services in Europe would not be able to handle that. You would smash every asylum service to bits. And also, a little known fact is that if these people were put into the asylum process, not only would the asylum services succumb, but you need to do the asylum determination then. And you remember you could push someone back in the shallow part of the river. That's exactly what would have been in Ukraine, because the war does not, it affects the whole country, but the level of conflict is completely different in the east than in the west. So the internal flight alternative would have been applied, and then it would be a completely different story. Anyway, if you look at these examples, it's still crisis management. And I'm sure you all headed your organization. I am sure you know a lot about managing. And I don't think you, even if you were successful sometime at crisis management, something happened and you did well, I don't think you would dream of in your day-to-day management to be a crisis manager every day. It doesn't work. That's why it's called crisis management and not only management. But for some reason, this is what we're doing when it comes to migration and asylum. And these two trends that we're seeing, not only in Europe, but different places, where country after country becomes more and more restrictive on the grounds of asylum, but it's also asylum and migration that you're starting to turn the tap. At the same time, most countries in the West are in dire need of talent and labor. And you just look at the UN's demographic numbers. You know, a lot of countries are on the verge of imploding demographically during this century. So we have this great need, and the trend is to be restrictive. And this is the thing that you need to solve in the future for economical reasons. If you don't have talent and you don't have labor, you don't have a thriving economy. I'm not an economist, I'm a lawyer, so I don't know that, but I seem to have heard it before. So this is the equation that needs to be solved. How to create these legal pathways. But still we're mixing it up, because the legal pathways for people that are in need of protection I don't think that is what people are talking about. They talk about labor migration. And that exists in all countries. There are systems for that. Then people that are needing protection, there's a lot of people talking about how can we do this, how can we get them here safe. And I just say, but you have to tell me how many and who. And once you answer those questions, you're back at the resettlement programs. That is what how many and who. That is the resettlement programs. The resettlement programs are also totally voluntarily. There's no force here. It's any country who wants can do it. And when you want to bring down migration for political reasons, that's the first thing you go to, because there's no obligation, legal obligation. And then you start taking down those numbers. So the only legal pathway to get protection is actually the one that is the easiest prey for cut downs. And this is happening as we speak, both in Europe and in the US. Okay, I have no sense of time. That's why I worked in migration for 25 years. So I come to my conclusions, I think. We have now, since the last year, a new pact on asylum and migration in the EU. So the whole system is being revamped. This will come into application in June next year. And we at the agency, we are preparing for this. We are supporting member states, the Commission. We're changing all our work that we've done for the last 14 years to prepare for this. And what the pact can do is, it's not a solution either. It's like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but new legislation is always hailed. Like, now we took many years to negotiate this, and now it's going to happen. I don't think so. It takes a lot more. But we have a better shot at reaching convergence between the European member states, because that is something that really shakes the boat, rocks the boat. You know, why are they doing that? That's wrong. We're doing this, and that whole discussion. Also, it could stop the race to the bottom. Some member states, they made it so bad that nobody wanted to go there. Reception conditions and everything. And that is kind of, if you're good, you get many asylum seekers. If you're not good, you don't get so many. And that we need to alleviate. And our part in this, and our commitment to this, is the small one. It's to continue to support the European member states, to be able to train their staff, to understand the legislation, to understand the world around us, and when needed, come to the aid with the cavalry, which is the operational support. And with that, I thank you.